Uh, I'm going to get us started, so we'll be on time. And just want to welcome everybody, say a good morning to those of you on the West Coast and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast and in the central part of the United States. So I'm very excited about today's event. It's the beginning of what I hope is a continuing conversation that helps us think about communicating within, across, and beyond government to the public, to the people we serve. There's no question there's a radical rethink going on about, pertaining to what government is, what the role of government should be, and more specifically, the federal government and what they should do, who should do it, and how to think more clearly and intentionally about the why and how of government and of intergovernmental practices. So we thought we'd get this started, especially since things are somewhat chaotic at the federal level and it's hard to pin anything down. We thought we'd get this started by asking folks to talk about, and local government, start focusing on local government folks, to talk about how they communicate the why and how of their governments and how well those governments are doing, lessons learned, and next steps. And again, within government, across governments, and to the public. And this is a beginning conversation. And so with that, let me turn this over. Let me see if Mark, my co-chair of the standing panel, Mark, do you want to say anything?
Other than good morning to everyone, and we see a lot of new faces, so thank you for your interest and involvement. I think the subject matter, as Shelley identified it, is a real call to action for all those in the Academy to, in fact, live up to what we're chartered to do, and that is how do we deal with governance issues facing the country, and how do we advise Congress? It shows your interest. Shelley has laid out an impressive agenda. At the end, there's a few other thoughts that I would like to add to this discussion. But Shelley, let's get on and listen to the folks who have initially signed in to this conversation.
Yeah. And we know there's some technical issues getting folks in. Those of you who figured out the link, thank you. And this will be recorded. And again, as Mark suggested, we're trying to make the work we do very much not just about learning and communicating, but also about changing practice. So with that, let me toss it to Wally Bobkowitz, who is the city manager of Issaquah, Washington, who also runs the local government working group of Napa, to take us into this agenda today.
Great. Thank you very much, Shelley. Again, I'm Wally Bobkowitz out in Issaquah, Washington. So good morning. We'll take the West Coast lean here. The local government working group was formed at the end of last year by Napa. Working groups are kind of the next level after the standing panel. So the working groups get to focus on particular items, and we've got a group of fellows and other interested professionals working on local government issues. The working group is meeting on a quarterly basis. Our next meeting is coming up on June 10th. So we would encourage any of you who'd like to get more information to go ahead and check out the website, the Napa website. There's more information there. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Harry Black. Harry has had a distinguished local government management career, has been city manager in Cincinnati, most recently was in Stockton, California. And Harry, good morning. And he's going to start us off with some thoughts.
Good morning, Wally, and everyone else. Let me go here. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent, excellent. First, I want to say thank you, Shelley, for putting this together. We're going to be talking about several different interrelated subjects this afternoon/morning. I'm going to talk about, really the role of effective local government in enhancing and improving public trust as well as public confidence, and leveraging performance management and data analytics in that regard, particularly not only in terms of making government more effective, but also improving public trust, while also developing a myriad of content that we can use in terms of our communications and community engagement efforts. So again, I'm going to go through these slides and then I'm going to attempt technologically to link into a couple of websites that further demonstrate how to leverage this data analytics and performance management in terms of communicating with the public. Okay, the purpose of local government, it could be the purpose of county government, state government, federal government. You know, why do we exist? I think at the local government level, the essence of why we exist is to create safe, thriving, and inclusive communities. Uh, Obviously, we have responsibilities to protect public health, provide infrastructure that provides clean, safe drinking water, and transportation services and so forth, as well as public safety. And again, managing public resources with transparency and accountability, which is intensifying each day. And leading strategic change that is in direct alignment with what the community values and what the community wants. So, you know, if I had to come up with a mission statement for local government, I would say deliver accountable, efficient, and effective government for all residents. You know, why does it matter? I'm going to talk about basically four separate segments of the whole performance management spectrum, from strategic planning, performance management, leveraging stat methods and methodologies, innovation labs in terms of improving processes and solving community problems, and then how do we leverage all of this data and information in terms of empowering the public with insights, as well as the ability to access this information on their own if they so desire. So during my career, I've always been interested in performance management and data analytics, but was never in a position, never in the right executive position to really explore it in the manner and at the scale that I was interested in doing. I'm going to talk a little bit about Baltimore, which is my hometown, but it's also a place where I was able to dive a little deeper into the whole stat process. But you'll see cities are doing bits and pieces of these things, but I wanted to pull them all together under one umbrella. And that is, the stat method utilization. iLabs, let's say Baltimore has sort of established itself as the leader in terms of stat programs in a non-public safety environment. Denver has Peak Academy, which is basically an iLab that leverages lean techniques. And most cities are using open data, big data these days, but they're doing it in different ways. And I've introduced a new component to this process. It's a one-page strategic plan with a corresponding electronic performance scorecard. And I'm going to delve a little bit more into that. So my philosophy is that if the government is not working well, and if we're not meeting the public's expectations, then the public is not going to have confidence and trust in us. And so therefore, it won't matter what we communicate to the public because we will not have their trust. So the key is getting our house in order, making certain that we are doing the things that we should be doing as a government organization, developing and enhancing our reputation and credibility. So that's the key thing. So again, I'm going to talk about how these various components are intertwined and integrated in terms of helping us to develop high-performing local government organizations. So again, the key pillars is obviously laser-focused strategic planning, not necessarily the kind of planning that your community development department is going to engage in. This is not your general plan or anything of that magnitude. This is more so operationally focused strategic planning. How are we going to deliver what we said we were going to deliver to the public? And how are we going to know how well we're doing, and how will we hold ourselves accountable? Uh, Obviously, I mentioned the Innovation Lab, basically solving problems, improving processes through lean techniques, Stockton Stat or Cincy Stat, or you've got the Baltimore Stat process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Stat as well. Uh, I'm going to touch on performance management agreements, and then also just leveraging open data or data in general for internal purposes as well as external purposes in terms of involving the public in what we do. So setting the foundation. The one-page strategic plan came to me while serving as the city manager of Cincinnati. I met a gentleman, he was retired, a retired senior executive from Procter & Gamble. And he became a mentor of mine, and the one-page strategic plan is his brainchild. And so I had him to go through the exercise for me for the city of Cincinnati. And I really fell in love with the tool, and he's given me permission to use it. Oh, well, initially he gave me permission to sell it, but that didn't work out too well. So I decided to just go ahead and continue to use it. And so I've used it in Cincinnati as well as in Stockton, California. And so basically, it's the one-page strategic plan serves as a roadmap. Okay. The city council every year establishes priority goals. Hopefully they remain the same from one year to the next, but are tweaked somewhat. And so once the council has identified the priority goals, then we are now able to build out the one-page strategy plan. And we usually do that over 3 days with several weeks in between. We have, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'll make the presentation available to everyone so you can see the details of what takes place in session 1, 2, and 3. There's always homework assignments, which is why there's a 4-week interval between work sessions. The whole idea is laser focused. When I first got to Stockton, we went through this process, and the council came up with 9 goals, and I cringed because it's too many. Stephen Jobs once said that organizations don't fail because they do too little, they fail because they try to do too much. And so less is always best. So the magic number for me is always 5. And so ultimately, 3 years later, we finally got the 5 goals. And so what that was an indication of is that we were really honing in on laser focus in terms of the right kind of goals. And so this is the end product. So a lot of work involving the entire organization leads to the establishment of this one-page strategic plan. Obviously, you have your vision, you have your objectives, which defines what is winning for the city. Whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Stockton, what is winning? And obviously, front and center are always going to need to be the city council priority goals, because the city council members are actually involved in the formation of this one-page strategy. Then you have all of your strategies and corresponding plans. To the far right, you have some metrics, but behind this one-pager is an electronic performance scorecard. We developed it in-house, the scorecard, and we're just leveraging Microsoft Excel technology. We didn't have to hire a large IT company, or we just did it with our own resources. And We finally were able to perfect it. And so the scorecard obviously is tracking several hundred data points across the organization, but directly in alignment with the priority goals, the strategies, and the plans. And so this is just sort of a depiction of what it looks like. Again, the front end are the 5 strategies, and so each strategy is connected to various plans and tasks, and we're able to track it in real time. And so you've seen this. I mean, obviously, these scorecards were very popular back in the 90s. Uh, uh, you don't see them a lot today, but the method is still highly effective in my regard. Uh, and so the idea is it allows us to measure how well we're doing or how well we're not doing, and so forth. So tracking performance, it could be Sensi stat or it could be Stockton stat. As I mentioned, in 1994, CompStat was developed by the New York Police Department. And late in the late 90s, I worked for the city of New York as well as the New York City Transit Authority. And in 1994, there was no, I'm not sure if Microsoft Excel was around then, but it very well may have been. Uh, but literally, CompStat leveraged sticky pens and twine on maps, basically. That was it. That was how high tech it was. And so fast forward to 2000, former Baltimore Mayor Martin O'Malley, who's also the former governor of Maryland, he introduced CityStat in Baltimore. I give him credit because I've not come across anyone else other than him who's civilianized the stat process. CompStat was basically for police departments and primarily NYPD. But Martin O'Malley took the method, the tool, and he adapted it to police as well as non-police uses. And then in 2015, I introduced a stat program to the city of Cincinnati. And then in 2020, I introduced a stat program to the city of Stockton, California. So the stat process is designed to drive results and outcomes. So I'm going to go to this slide. Well, I'm going to come back. So basically, this is my Cincinnati stat facility. It's a dedicated, I think it might be sort of like 4,000 to 5,000 square feet of space where we had all of our IT big data stuff behind the wall there. We had staff space, which is the upper left-hand corner photo. And you can see the bottom left-hand corner was our innovation lab. Obviously, we're using lean techniques to improve processes and to solve problems. The far right corner is the actual stat room itself. It's designed to have a panel. The panel consists of the city manager, assistant city managers, key department heads from IT to HR to the law department to budget and finance. And then whatever we were statting and whoever was responsible for delivering that stat, they were up front. And the idea was that this was not a gotcha or punitive exercise. This was our way of saying, okay, we're all in this together. We have to work it together, and we're going to make decisions on the spot. So if a department had an issue, we dealt with it right then and there, which is why it was important to have everyone at the table who could make a decision. And so, the stat process follows 4 basic tenets. And these tenets, I believe, were established, I believe, by Baltimore and Mayor O'Malley at the time. Accurate and timely intelligence shared by all, effective tactics and strategies, rapid deployment of resources, and relentless follow-up and assessment. That is the number one thing, relentless follow-up. And so the STAT process starts with the development of a STAT memo. So staff in the Office of Performance and Data Analytics would work with a particular department. Let's say if it was Public Works, they would develop a memo which would serve as the agenda for the STAT meeting. Then we would have the meeting. Then there would be a follow-up memo from that meeting, and the department working with Office of Performance and Data Analytics staff would work on the follow-up items. And then we would garner data from the whole process that we would fold back up into our performance scorecard. This is just some samples of STAT memos. Again, they serve sort of as an agenda for the meeting, and you've seen that. So improving process. Some of you may be familiar with Peak Academy in Denver, for the city of Denver. I was able to establish an iLab for both Cincinnati as well as the city of Stockton. And again, it's just having a third-party facilitator, putting all of the right people in the room with the right tools, and literally doing a deep dive into a process or a particular problem. The idea is we're trying to generate insights while we're doing it. And you've seen pictures like this before. You know, it's the world of stickies, and you're dissecting a process. And my rule of thumb was always that if we could not get at least 10 to 15% of value out of a particular step in a process, we need to delete the step because it's not adding much sufficient value. I've got an example here is in both Cincinnati and Stockton. If you go to any city in America, you ask citizens, you ask the business community, you ask the developer community, you know, what are your top 2 to 3 issues with the city? I guarantee you that the permits process will be one of the 3. Guaranteed. I'll put money on it every time. And I was determined to explore that problem and to figure out a way to try to solve that problem. And so in both Cincinnati and in Stockton, we put our permitting process in the iLab. And so just to give you a visual in terms of what the iLab looked like, you're talking about 20 to 25 people in a room with the third-party facilitator, from the intake clerk all the way up to, let's say, the department head and everybody in between, whoever touched the process from police, transportation, fire, health, public works, utilities, they were represented in the room. And what I found is that these are a lot of like 15, 20, and 25-year employees who, in some cases, they've interacted with each other via email or a phone call, but they've never seen each other before in person. These are employees. And so it was just amazing to see the reaction in the room when some of these individuals were able to actually meet someone that they speak to regularly on the phone or via email. And so the long and short of it is that we were able to lean out the permitting process. And in both cases, in Cincinnati and in Stockton, we were able to reduce the process cycle times for the start to finish of a permit application by 45%. And on the most complex permit applications, we were able to reduce that by 33%. And we involved the developer community and other community members to be a part of that process as well. Another component of performance management agreements. Did these in, I'm showing it as an example for Stockton, but we really were able to do it in Cincinnati. The idea is that department heads have annual performance reviews. And those are just the standard things that we're tracking and that we're measuring in terms of individual performance and department performance. But the performance management agreements were agreements between a department head and the city manager, where the department head is saying, I'm going to strive to do this one really, really big thing or these two really, really big things during the next 12-month period. And this is what I need you to do to help me to do that, city manager. And so both of them, we make the commitment, and this is just trying to push the needle, basically, uh, other than the regular stuff that we do as a government organization. Telling your story, again, we want to make sure that we have a story to tell. And that's why all of the previous slides are so critical, because they're all about making government high performing and effective and responsive. Because if we're not doing those things, it doesn't really matter what story we want to tell. The it's not going to resonate because we just won't have the credibility. So the performance management and data analytics and all of those things are to help us to be able to deliver on what we promise our customers, who are the residents and businesses that operate within our city limits. And now we can tell our story comfortably because we have credibility. And so cities have open data portals. They use graphic visualizations to communicate certain things. And so these are just some examples of just some of those visualizations that we were able to develop in both Stockton and Cincinnati. I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to try to take you to a couple of websites, and hopefully I will be successful in doing that. Let's see here if I can. Can you see that? It says Stockton Insights. Does that come across? Can you see that, Shelley? You can? Okay. So in essence, we collect data, as mentioned, for internal purposes as well as external. Okay. The internal collection of data is to support the stat process and the stat methodology. The external is really to try to graphically visualize what we do as a city for the public's benefit. And so in essence, they can go into any of a number of categories and track and follow and have an interactive experience with this particular dashboard.
Mary, can you make that a little bigger?
Okay, let me, I think that's going to be
Don't worry
it.
about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it. And so they can go in the case of Cincinnati, if you're just a resident, you can go in, you can register, and in registering, it is free, obviously. You can download actual data sets if that's what you do. If you are a data-oriented person and you want to do something with the data set, you're more than welcome to do that. You can ask questions, you can provide feedback. So that's just an example. Let's see here.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting the live feed, just the snapshot of the slide.
Right. Okay. But the idea is you have like, I think we've got up to about 60 data sets in Stockton, and I think Cincinnati, because it's been around for a much longer period of time, they have several hundred data sets. They're totally available to the public, and they have visualizations that correspond to a particular data set. So in closing, really, communication. So I can't emphasize enough that local government has to be viewed as being effective and as being responsive. We need tools and methods that help us to make certain that we are operating at a very effective level as it relates to garnering the trust and the credibility that we need to be able to optimize how we communicate with the public. And so obviously we use our websites, we're using social media, we're using other technologies such as sentiment analysis type technology. But we have and I think some of the other speakers today are going to talk about this as well. It's not moving the needle the way that we really must move the needle. And so one of the things I'm interested in us continuing to explore as a group is what's the next iteration of how we are communicating and engaged. I don't think we know that yet because I think we have to do a deep dive into really
Yeah,
dissecting where we are.
well, I'm on a Zoom webinar, but they can't hear me.
Yeah.
Shelley, we
So
can't hear who's ever talking.
yeah. So this slide is just providing some food for thought in terms of how we begin to go down that road
Okay, all right.
of developing some kind of a playbook as it relates to communications and engagement. So shifting from outreach to co-creation, okay? Building processes that allow residents not just to give input, but to shape decisions and design. So how do we, in the next iteration of how we do this, how can we allow citizens and residents to actually have a participatory role that is kind of real time? I had no idea. That's a question. That's a part of that deep dive. Uh, Using data to target and improve inclusion, but ensure it reflects lived experience, not just digital behaviors. The biggie for me is creating anytime, anywhere engagement, 24/7, 365. And that's obviously leveraging emerging technologies as well as existing technologies, blending digital, physical, and mobile tools for 24/7 access to participation in government. Uh, it doesn't have to be 9 to 5 City Hall. Uh, Building engagement capacity and measure and report back. We do a lot of surveys of all sorts. And so the community participates in those surveys, but what happens after that? Yes, internally, we use the information that we've garnered from the surveys in terms of leveraging it for doing the work that we do. But what difference does the survey make for those survey participants? How do we make it meaningful, sort of say after the fact? So those are some things that I think we should be thinking about uh, uh, in terms of community engagement and communications next generation or 2.0 as it relates to local government in particular, because I think we can do it at the local government level. It'll make it a lot easier to do it at the state and federal levels as well. And so that's it for my presentation. And at the appropriate time, I look forward to answering any questions. And hopefully that was interesting and insightful for you all.
Thank you very much, Harry. Wally, you want to take it from here?
Yes, I can. I think our next speaker is Lisa Brown. Lisa is the Economic and Urban Development Director in the city of Rock Hill, South Carolina. And Lisa is going to talk a little bit about the work that they are doing in Rock Hill and more specifically their designation by Bloomberg Philanthropies as a What's Work City community, one of only 3 under 100,000 population in the United States. So Lisa, we're still in the morning here on the West Coast, so I'll say good morning.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate your time this morning/afternoon. My name is Lisa Brown. As you mentioned, I'm in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And I've been grateful to be at the city of Rock Hill for 13 years in a number of different capacities, most recently as the Economic and Urban Development Director. Prior to that, I've done strategic planning as well as the city's budget for a couple of years there at the beginning. And really what I wanted to talk about today is kind of directly in line with what Harry was talking about with performance management and how we have used that to leverage our service provision here. So if you look at the map, we're about 20 miles south of Charlotte, North Carolina, just over the border in South Carolina. We're a full service city, so we provide all your normal municipal functions, but we're also an electric provider. So we are a partial owner of a Catawba nuclear plant reactor with 10 other cities. So we have this really unique kind of utility system. We also have a water plant that we run and transmit. So we've recently done upgrades from 36 to 48 million gallons a day. So we provide water for most of York County, which is just over 250,000 people. Sewer plant is been upgraded or is in the process of an upgrade from 20 to 30 million gallons a day. Again, the wholesale provider there for most of York County, as well as our neighbor to the south, Chester County. We have a mayor and 6 council members, all nonpartisan. And most people know us because if you're at a hotel room or traveling and ESPN's on, somebody will see slippery stairs or something like that at our sports and event center. We have a 170,000 foot sports and event center, which has been the culmination of a focus on sports tourism, leveraging our hospitality tax to build facilities that draw in visitors, but also our local residents get to use. And our other random fact is that we have more NFL players from Rock Hill, South Carolina than anywhere else per capita because we love data around here. The love of data is not something that started with me, but it's definitely something that's been a part of Rock Hill's history. So I included this just to kind of level set that Rock Hill was a model cities community. So in April 1967, our city council applied to the federal government through HUD to do a study for $125,000 about how they could leverage federal funding in a new way under the Model Cities program. And we've recently found these reports from 1970 and 1972 about this kind of new idea of how to leverage federal funding in a way to improve the quality of life in our community. And I can say since then, this has just been an iterative process, something that we continually have used to our advantage of how to leverage different opportunities to improve the quality of life here in Rock Hill. And a lot of that's built around our strategic plan. As Harry talked about the one sheet strategic plan, we have our own version of that. It's a 3-year strategic plan that we use from a variety of data sources. So we use the National Citizen Survey, which we get done every 3 years to kind of give us different data points. We do focus groups with our residents. We have a business survey that goes to every single business license holder in the city limits of Rock Hill. We have our measures that we track, similar to the scorecard example that Harry was showing. We use Power BI internally for how we measure those. So we have real-time data, and we also have our normal city area plans. So our long-range planning folks with our comprehensive plan, as well as any kind of small area plans, community meetings, and then we do an employee survey every 3 years. And we have all of these data points that we then fold into our strategic plan. And one of the things I think if you ask anybody that's been in Rock Hill or knows about Rock Hill is in the last 20 years, we've only had 1 3-mil tax increase. And I think a lot of that is because we've really tried to be strategic about how we can most efficiently provide core services and increase our service offering without increasing taxes. When we think about how we have done that over the course of time, what Wally mentioned, the What Works Cities designation, there's really been a long-standing history and tradition of using data to drive how we move around here. And so that What Works Cities designation was really a validation. We had done the ICMA performance management certificate for years, but really pushing ourselves to figure out how we can track what we're doing, how we can tell that story, and how we can better drive the efficiency of the service provision that we have. The What Works Cities designation was a great validation of that data-driven approach. Second to that, as Harry mentioned, kind of the iLab, we have our own version of that, an employee training program that we called Ignite. We always felt like Denver Peak Academy felt like you're reaching the peak and falling off. So we really wanted to kind of just ignite the flame that employees were constantly looking at their own work and trying to figure out how they could improve the process to deliver something higher quality for our residents and our businesses. We're big fans of public-private partnerships around here. We're in South Carolina. We're really fortunate that we have great state tax credits to help incentivize different types of projects. We've entered into a lot of public-private partnerships, especially on the redevelopment front of former textile mills. And so there's a lot of benefits that we've found through having well-established public-private partnerships where we're able to essentially monetize some of the tax credits to offset our costs, where we also see the kind of development that we want to see, especially in our downtown. Over the last 12 years, since we did our last big redevelopment strategy for downtown, we've got about $750 million worth of investment. A lot of that due to the tax credits that the private sector, as well as us in collaboration, have been able to leverage. We have a fantastic staff department that entirely focuses on grants. So we have 4 full-time employees that manage, apply, and do all the reporting for our grants. So you can see since 2012, almost $150 million has been leveraged. Some of this is federal, some of this is state, some of this is through foundations. We have associated nonprofits on our housing side and our economic development side. So we're able to, reach out to banks or get tax credits that our utility providers would offer, like telecommunications. We've been able to leverage that for some of our business park development. But really, those grants have really helped feed, because we know what's in our strategic plan. It really helps kind of a win-win scenario to say these are the priorities of what our residents and our elected officials and everybody's on board with. And all of our grant applications will automatically tie to that strategic plan. So it really helps offset some of those costs. And then the transparency aspect, we really feel like, the long-standing reports are helpful, but really that Power BI has really impacted how we can slice and dice data in a way that really helps us be better informed, especially internally, about how we're operating and what we can do. So one of the best examples that I really think of this like partnership between our data and our analytics and how that has impacted our service delivery was our MPO is called the Rock Hill Fort Mill Area Transportation Study, RFATS. And in 2015, one of the maps that they put up was about zero vehicle households. The city of Rock Hill had a transit system in the 90s, but had backed away from it because we had contracted it out. There was not good data and metrics about the system, what it was doing, and how funds were being allocated. And so we had a number of data points in the mid 2010s that were really moving us in the direction of trying to figure things out. So if you look at this map, you can see Rock Hill is kind of dead in the middle, where there's dark purple below. And then you could see, just in terms of the share of zero vehicle households, there were just so many folks in the Rock Hill area that didn't have access to a vehicle. We saw this in a number of other forms. So I mentioned we have all those different data sources that support our strategic plan. In our National Citizen Survey, there was 81% of the respondents said that they would strongly or somewhat support a citywide fixed route bus line. Anytime the mayor had meetings, for example, we did these word clouds in 2015 where we asked people, based on our strategic plan of quality services, quality places, and quality community at the time, what were the most important things? And people would give us one word. And the biggest word that showed up out of our word cloud was transportation. So it was just a reinforcement of hard data, as well as community meetings, as well as surveys, where everything was pointing in the direction that we had to figure out a way to address what was this gaping hole in our service provision. So we were kind of stuck of how to launch a public transit system from scratch. We had all that data and we knew that that was something that was desired. But again, this is a community where there's really not a lot of appetite for raising taxes for this kind of endeavor. And so it was approved for us to really figure out how to make that happen in 2017. And we got it off the ground in 2019 for an all-electric, fare-free public transit system. As I mentioned, we're a part owner of the Catawba nuclear plant. And so there was a really big desire to have it be all electric, because they felt, and our elected officials, especially as an electric city, they felt like if we were able to have an emission-free vehicle that could contribute to solving this public transportation, that was a goal. We really didn't want to get into fares, just all of the literature about public transit, everything that we looked into. It was just if there was a way to make it fare free, that was entirely the intention, because we didn't want there to be any barriers to folks that needed to get where they wanted to go. So we were fortunate that we were able, there's some funding that we were able to get through the FTA called 5307 funds, that essentially they're allocated annually, and you have a certain period, you have 5 years to spend it. And so technically 6 if you add up kind of the gap between when the funding is allocated and when you can use it. And so we were being allocated about $1 million annually for that, and we were only using like 200,000 a year. So we had, 800,000 or so that was being built up every year. So we were able to then bank all of those funds, start the initial system with this big chunk of money that we had for the capital expense. We're still able to use that funding that offsets our operating costs 50-50. We, in order to make it fare free, the mayor really went out of his way and above and beyond to go talk to our private partners. As I mentioned, public-private partnerships have worked in a lot of other kind of more development areas, but the mayor really pushed on them that they had to step up and they had to help us make this happen. So our local hospital, telecommunications, a local bank, a lot of folks stepped up. So we get about $400,000 annually in sponsorships. We have very limited ad space on our buses. So if you look, they're wrapped, and the hospital will get one whole side of a bus, or inside it's very limited ads, because again, we wanted to make sure that we were good partners with anybody that contributed, but we just didn't want it to feel spammy. We wanted it to be something that we were all proud of. The state also contributes about 200,000, and then our general fund contribution is about 500,000 annually. Because we're in a growing area right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, we were able to leverage the growth that we have to make that work in a way that didn't raise taxes. And we always come back to data, because I think that's really what helps tell the story. And so anytime that we've gotten pushback, it's been really, really easy to point at things like our ridership. So you can see when the bus system launched in 2019, we had just over 200,000 passenger trips in that first year. COVID, we dropped off a bit. We had to redo everything that we had done the prior year to get the bus system launched. But we still had 153,000 passenger trips that year, because it was still vitally important for people to get where they needed to go. And you can see the numbers have continued to climb. Our national citizen survey that we do once every 3 years, you can see, the metrics of people, respondents that said they use public transportation instead of driving, went up by 9%. The number of passenger trips per month, almost 25,000 per month. We're a community of about 75,000 in the city limits. So it's not like this is a huge, it's not like it's revolutionary, but it's obviously impacting people getting where they need to go. Because we've been able to leverage that federal funding, our partners, and then additional grants that we've gotten for things like electric chargers that were not entirely related to our electric system, but we were able to use other grants. It's really saved us a ton of money in being able to offer this service. So again, just trying to figure out what's the best way of how to use data to kind of answer what the needs of our community have been. And I think, some of the challenges that we have seen and that we'll continue to see, there's lots of questions about what future funding will look like. And so as we have these all electric buses, that's wonderful, but we're kind of at an impasse now where the company that we bought these from filed for bankruptcy, and everything that they have is proprietary. So how do we manage to keep our fleet still working and still providing this service? Lots of questions about future funding, like is this, on the chopping block? Public transportation systems across the country clearly get a lot of support from the federal government, but is that something that we can continue to rely on as we make capital purchases moving forward? So I think there's a lot of dynamics, but that data-driven approach we really feel like is the best way for us to try to tell our story and to keep this really valuable service going. So with that, I'll pass it over, I believe, to Shelley or Dawn.
Yeah.
There.
Well, I'll just say a quick thank you to both Lisa and Harry for a spectacular presentation of how to communicate with the data. to a bunch of different audiences. And then maybe if Don Borat, former head of the National League of Cities, wants to give us a few comments and then toss to Jeff Beckwith, former head of the Massachusetts Municipal Association. So go for it, Don.
Okay, I just want to make one observation. Clearly, the two examples showed the creative ability to use data and to provide information in a form that is communicated. The big issue for me, and basically it's an issue that NAPA is confronting, is how are we communicating to different audiences? And how do people get information? And are we using the most creative tools? More specifically, I think we have to look at different audiences. Not everybody looks for data or information in the same way. And clearly, at the national level, the Republicans this last election figured out how to use different channels to reach different audiences using language that was specific to those audiences. And to me, one of the things I'd be interested in is how some of the two cities and other cities have figured out to use communication channels differently than we've used in the past. We're really good at talking with ourselves and to audiences that are similar. So we can talk to planners and using planning language, and to managers using language that they use. But what about looking at other audiences and what in fact speaks to them in a way that it resonates? So I'll leave it there and turn it over to Jeff.
So great set of questions. Robert Shea was going to join us and give a bit on the federal perspective, but unfortunately a last minute conflict came up that he couldn't avoid. So he and I have talked, and we are going to try and do a second session on the same subject, but from the federal perspective. But now let me toss it back to Jeff to keep this conversation going with all of you, because this is the beginning and we need to. Don just teed up how do we communicate with a larger group of people so people understand why government exists? And then Lisa just gave us several examples of how the federal government was helpful, but also how it's now complicating things. So Jeff, you get to complicate, to roll this up for us.
Great. Thanks, Shelley. And thanks for inviting me. What a great group presentation from Harry and Lisa. Of course, Dawn's been a mentor of mine throughout the years. And this conversation about how we get the public to understand and support and build trust in local government is critical, but also at all levels of government. I think in particular, we almost always start to talk about these issues from the perspective as practitioners of what's the problem to be solved. And we do a deep dive into the problem. And sometimes we get a little too technical, and the public doesn't really want to be involved in the conversation about best practices between the experts who they rely on. So let's take a step back and take a step back and say, is there good news out there? And the answer is yes. The public actually is getting from a whole variety of sources enough positive messages and beliefs about local government that local government is itself the most trusted governmental institution in the country. The local government, in the most recent study of government levels of trust at all levels by Gallup in connection with Pew, and I think NAPA might have been involved with this as well, sees the American public has about 67% of people have a high level of trust in their local government and in local government in general. 59% have a high level of trust in their state governments where they live. Only 41% of people support and have trust in the federal bureaucracy that is under the control of the executive branch, the President of the United States. Only 40%, interestingly, have trust in politicians, the men and women who make their careers by running and being elected to office. And only 32% of people trust Congress. And so I think the big message, the takeaway is local government being the least partisan, the most non-political, the most present, and the most visible, and therefore seen as the most accountable level of government, is trusted most and is trusted across the spectrum. Republicans, Democrats, and independents generally trust local government the same. When you go up to the higher levels of government, that's more distant, more removed, more affiliated with partisan politics, you see a much narrower partisan, a much wider partisan divide. And you see when Democrats are in office in the presidency, more Democrats support the federal bureaucracy. When the Republican president is in, more Republicans. Actually, Republicans in general don't ever have a majority of people supporting the federal bureaucracy. And so I think one of the big lessons to be learned is the depoliticization of our governments locally has made the public trust us more. The second is, let's take a step back. I don't think the average citizen wants to be in the car as local government officials are driving the car down the street and deciding how to run this complicated piece of machinery. But they are bystanders standing on the curb, and they can compare how safely the local government car goes by, whether or not the car is following the rules, and whether or not the car itself inspires trust. I can step in the crosswalk because I trust that that car is going to slow down. If the car is driven by people who are perceived to be politicians, people don't want to step in the crosswalk, and they don't want to certainly they don't even get near that car. And so part of what we need to do is to operate from, I think, in the local government level, a position of strength. The public already is receiving positive messages about what local government is doing and values local government more than any other political institution. So what can we learn about this? What we can learn is that if we can use the tools that Harry and Lisa have talked about for states and the federal government to amplify what they're doing in a way that makes it more transparent and seemingly much less political, maybe we can rebuild some strength at the federal and the state level. The other final piece before I open it up for questions is to say I really do think that there's some lessons to be learned, and I'm not being political here, but I think that we can see from the current president that there's a communication style that builds a sense of community among a very strong but relatively small base, about 32 to 35% of the people. But the messaging that's done is when there's bad news out there, deny, distort, deflect, and divide. And essentially create this small community that trusts, and then use that united small group to leverage it to weaken whoever the target happens to be. Usually it's a defensive target. Local government, and actually no government agency, can do the same thing. They have to do the opposite. They have to acknowledge. They have to engage. They have to engage involve a process of improvement and accepting responsibility and being accountable. So we can't communicate in the same way. I don't even think we can take lessons from a partisan lesson from how to communicate and use it for local government. What we have to do is figure out how we have more people in the community have a sense of community identity, a sense of pride, and a sense of celebration about all of the progress that the community has made over the past generation. And those are the things we need to stand out. That's my own feeling as a practitioner who's worked to lobby state and federal officials for 3 decades before my retirement. But I think the position is local government's most resilient and positioned to be able to weather storms that other levels of government can't, but the other levels can learn from us. So at this point, we have about a half an hour left, open it up for questions for any of our presenters regarding either how these tools have been able to communicate the good work of local government, or if they have thoughts about what Dawn raised. Any questions from the group? Just, we're informal here since there's only 26 of us on right now, and you can just unmute, ask a question, then remute yourself, and we'll have any of the presenters here take a question. Okay, I guess that means I'll start if somebody else isn't. So I'm going to ask Harry and Lisa.
You've got Kitty Woolley. She's raised her hand. See that?
Oh, okay, Kitty. Okay, Kitty, go ahead.
Hi. This question is for Harry. And Harry, did I understand correctly? I was thinking about the processes that have been built for residents to co-create. And did you say that there sort of weren't any yet, but that it would be nice if we could figure out how to build those processes?
Yeah, we have something. We have means and methods today that are intended to do that,
Mhm.
but they've become stale in my view, and so we have to reinvent them. As Jeff was saying, we have to be, and Dawn, we have to now take these old paradigms of engagement, communications, and we have to modernize them in essence.
Okay. So is there, and you know this, why? I mean,
I live it. I've lived it.
yeah, I know. I understand that, Harry. What I'm trying to find out is, do you have an example of an actual process that was stood up that was used to invite residents to co-create, or is that still an idea? And I understand all the reasons why that's hard. And the reason I'm asking that, I'll just tell you, and then you can, because it sounds like maybe there hasn't been one yet. There is, and I've been racking my brain to find this again. And I mean, if the city of Santa Cruz had a budget, sort of a closing the gap problem years ago, it was in the early 2000s, and what they did was, one guy, I don't remember, I think it was end of the fiscal year, I don't know what else would drive the urgency, but one guy coded a solution over a 3-day period, a weekend, that let anyone in Santa Cruz who had a dog in the fight look at all the things that were discretionary in the budget and talk about, or indicate how they thought what they thought the budget should look like. So it was, talk about resident co-creation. I don't know. I mean, is that something that you would even be interested in if I could find more information on that? Because they actually closed that gap and had didn't have a shortfall, met their fiduciary responsibilities, and I'm just it.
Yeah, I would respond by saying that that example that you've provided is a prime example of more of what's going to have to happen in terms of that 2.0, that next 2.0 level of community engagement. I mean, obviously today, particularly on the planning side of things, when we're doing our general plan updates and other related planning activities, we have the public there with staff, and they're going through charrettes, they're going through exercises, and that's effective. But what you just mentioned as an example in terms of Santa Cruz, I think more of that kind of activity is what's going to be reflective of the future. So
Okay.
that's a great example.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kitty, for the question. I do think I'll ask a question for the panelists.
Jeff, can I just talk? So Kitty, I think it would be great if you could chase that down. And let me also say that I think one of the really interesting questions for Napa is, you know, how does Napa play a role, or do others play a role finding those effective practices and sharing them, right? And the feds are probably not going to get there. I think there is a citizen budgeting movement going on that I'll try and chase down too. But I think that's something we as fellows, and just anybody on this call, whether you're a fellow or not, we ought to think about how do you find effective or promising practices and share them. And I will just say, you know, the federal government has multiple, the inspector generals, the single audit clearinghouse, you know, single audits required of grantees, the GAO. It's got lots of capacity to look for problems. Can we get any of those entities to start to look for possibilities and promising practices? And maybe that's something we want to think about as a group.
Okay.
I can say, at least from my perspective, some of the most impactful ways that we've been able to connect with people is essentially figuring out what our different stakeholder groups are and how they have a tie to it. So for example, we're working on a regional park, which is next. And as I mentioned, sports tourism is a big part of what we do, but you know, we still have one of those old citizen academies inside Rock Hill. It still is packed every single session that they have it. And so we essentially create little ambassador groups, whether it's through the Inside Rock Hill lens. We have a lifelong learning program that has 1,500 unique participants that sign up for classes. So what we'll do there is we'll specifically have a class at Lifelong Learning that says, you want to know about Parks and Rec, like, let's tell you about it. And, oh, we're working on this. Then it's also those other components. So if we have our park monitors that go and they count how many people are walking the trails at one of our different parks, it's manning them with the flyers to say, hey, this is a way that you can fill out a survey, or you can come to this meeting. So it's almost like deploying people, because I think we've kind of landed, we still have our neighborhood meetings, we still have all of your traditional ways that you engage with people. But the reality is most people don't care. They want to know that their, you know, trash gets picked up, if they call 911, that somebody's responding and they're responding quickly, that they're being heard and receptive. But it's almost like if you're not moving the earth too much, they're okay with the status quo. So I think we have taken the perspective that we would much rather engage with people that are already engaged in some way and give them the opportunity through an avenue that they already have to like plug in, if that makes sense.
That's a great point, Lisa. And I do think that there are lots of examples that that Napa could help to pull together. They probably exist in all sorts of different forums, but just for the purpose of fellows being able to have a common resource. I can just think about the whole idea of citizen academies and training people into what local government has done and what the success stories are and what they're trying to do. But then once they go through this, encourage them to post on social media and to respond to criticisms on social media of the community, so that they can be the ambassadors and help to amplify the voice. So it's not just a city or a town PR official, one person who's having to do all the work, and you stand it up and you can create a way of going forward where you have a lot more people who are there. But it will always be the case that it will be a relatively small number of the community that will be actively engaged. But helping to amplify the positive voices is, and the message about what local government is and defend would increase resiliency. I have a question for the group, the presenters so far, regarding AI and the use of AI, because I really do think that the AI could end up being a democratizer in terms of making it much easier for resource-stressed communities to be able to engage in and apply the kind of technologies and the systems that you have done and worked on, so that communities themselves can access a municipally trained AI model to be able to get ideas and respond to specific circumstances, drawing on the knowledge and the expertise of the innovative practitioners like you. Any thoughts about AI, Harry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. It's something that I think about quite a bit. And I think as I constantly raise the notion of, community engagement, community involvement, communications 2.0 for local governments, I think it's going to be made possible because of AI, machine learning, and digitization. Obviously, I think we all have some concerns and anxiety about AI in general, because there will be good as well as bad, most likely. But in this case, we're talking about some good applications. So again, we're already playing with AI. I know in Stockton we've implemented a couple of chatbots that we've attached to our service request system and some other systems. And so that's just sort of the entry level into that world. But I think AI and machine learning and then ultimately digitization is going to allow for that 24/7 access to City Hall. You're not going to be reliant upon having someone there from 9 to 5. You can access your government on demand, and you can curate and customize how you want that to be. So AI, I believe, will allow for the next level of customer self-service to that 24/7 access, as well as a customer's ability to curate their own unique, customized experience.
And also as a consumer of I think that municipalities could use this to copy innovations that have been made and implement them in their own communities. So for example, we have communities in Massachusetts that have a visual budget where citizens can go and click on the budget and they can just click on and get more and more visualization about size and where the expenditures are made, what's actually in there. And that takes a lot of resources for the first communities to build it. But using AI, it could be possible in just a few years for a community to essentially take a municipally trained AI model and just say, transform our local budget into a visual budget, and then go and double check it for hallucinations. But I really do think that those kinds of ways of making government more transparent and accessible could be done at relatively low cost by communities.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts from our panelists before I open it up to other questions? Anyone else have a question regarding this? We're talking about ways to essentially make government more resilient from attack and to increase the level of trust and confidence that people have so that government can actually get the resources they need. I think one of the tragedies coming now is essentially the decapacitization of the federal government as a partner to states and localities. Just want to see from our panelists what your frontline concerns are about that in terms of your ability to maintain the programming that you have at a level that invokes trust from your residents.
Jeff, I'm going to just turn this back to you. At an earlier discussion, you talked about the importance of stories, and you really didn't pick that up. Do you want to just play that out a little bit?
Sure. I do think that, and we see this, and I think there's a lesson in your own states to talk to your state municipal associations that have been out there advocating for cities and towns for, in some cases, 40, 50 years, in other cases, over 100 years. They're the organizations that actually created NLC, which is the oldest national organization of local governments and local government officials in the country. And the idea is the state municipal leagues recognize that when they're going to fight at the state house, mostly, they're trying to fight a governor who's trying to take away power or to impose unfunded mandates, or to require an agenda be implemented that may be partisan, that local governments go to the legislature and they go to the media and the press, and they even go to their own membership And all they do is tell a story about what local government is doing and how the proposal would impact their ability to perform. And in some cases, it's as easy as going and saying, our communities are routinely implementing recycling programs that have, you could talk about A, B, C, D in terms of reducing the volume, increasing composting, whatever it is, in terms of positive benefits for the environment. This proposal would hurt us, or this proposal would help us, and then bring in a local official from a community that's working on this who can share the story. The media loves that because they can actually humanize the story. And the legislators love that because then they learn and they then talk about the reason why they support something or not. Usually what's happening is it's a battle of triangulation. People are going to the state house or they're going to the federal government to impose their agenda on local governments. And local governments are going to the federal government or to the state government to prevent triangulation and retain their ability to get the job done. And you can talk about the story. It could be on wastewater. It could be cleaning up hazardous waste sites. It could be on cleaning drinking water supplies. It could be on improving stormwater. It could be on bringing cable to every citizen in the community, not just the high-end neighborhoods. It could be all sorts of stories, but you need to bring it down to a level where essentially you're talking about American values. You're talking about providing everyone in the community with opportunity to succeed. You're talking about enhancing public safety, and you're talking about a sense of community as building America's story forward. It's something that it takes a little bit of time, but it's actually really exciting. And so whenever state municipal associations go to the state house, it's not the lobbyist who talks. It's the local official who can tell a story about how this impacts Goshen, Massachusetts, or Amherst, Massachusetts, or Braintree. And then the people realize that's a real life story that makes a difference. But you have to characterize it in a way that's personable, understanding, and compelling. And the problem is, the further you get away from the people, the more political those stories seem and the less credibility they have. And that's one of the reasons why the federal government and the federal bureaucracy, those people who have devoted their entire careers to making this country better, find themselves in a weak position to defend themselves from an attack on the professional state.
So a bit ago, Lisa, you had unmuted yourself. Did you have something you wanted to add? No? Okay.
Hey, Shelley, it's John here with AGA real quick. Just a quick note, I dropped in the chat something that AGA has championed a long time, which is our citizen-centric report. And an example I did as a council member in there as well as a potential future tool or conversation. But I think maybe the message or question I've got to the group, and Dawn, great to see you in person, and congratulations on 100 years of NLC. It was awesome to be a part of that with Clarence and the whole experience. I think the storytelling is critical right now. And I think, Lisa, when you look at the charts you shared and not having to raise a millage at all is amazing to me as someone who had to vote for tax raises every time I was on council. And that was very painful, even though we're talking about $10 a month for people who buy multiple lattes a day. But that whole framework of the storytelling, I just wonder if there isn't an opportunity using AI to come together and better tell our story collectively. Rather than each of us making up something on our own, when we think about the storytelling around miles of road paved or police response time, if there isn't a set of potential good leading indicators to choose from in a way that can make comparing across cities better. And I wonder if the groups like ICMA or maybe MML and the Virginia Municipal League couldn't get behind some of those drop down menu choices of how you might tell your story in there. So I wonder if the city managers and leaders of the crew, what they would think about that.
I think, no, I think this is the most fundamental discussion and the most fundamental question. We have the content. We have plenty of content to tell a variety of different stories. I think that we have to spend some time not only telling what the stories might be, but the delivery of the story. It's like a one size doesn't fit all. I think we develop a core story, and then we develop it in a way in which it's adaptable to different audiences. Uh, and so I clearly AI is going to be helpful in doing stuff like that without question. That'll be a 60-second exercise for ChatGPT. Once we know what we want it to do. And so that's really what I'm saying. We need to really think through the structure of how do we structure a story and what do we want to get out of the story, when we convey it. We're not just conveying a story, but how do we structure it in different ways to generate uh, the desired effect from one audience to the next? Because there are going to be multiple audiences that we're going to need to focus in on with the same message, but they may need to hear it slightly differently.
I actually think, I mean, one of the things I think about a lot is you need to put people in the picture. And I was just thinking, I mean, Lisa's story where you're saying, hey, guess what? I've just given you free transportation. So more people get to move where they want to go. And I'm not charging you more. Now, there's a very sophisticated story behind that. But I kind of, whoa, how the heck did you do that? I mean, that was amazing. I want to follow whatever Rock Hill is doing. And then I think, Harry, about, the potholes, that's kind of cool. The permits, that's cooler. But, maybe we ought to be mapping the potholes so people can relate to their own pothole, right? And sort of see.
Yeah.
And I think we're not very sophisticated at the storytelling, and that we're going to need to get more sophisticated. And we could learn community to community, government agency to government agency, and figure out the how you tell the story and the channels you use. I mean, and it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that if we don't take it on, we're gonna continue to lose the capacity of government to deliver what people want government to deliver.
Well, and
So
Shelley,
another
I think
great
that-
example, I just want to, and you'll appreciate this example, Jeff, for sure, based on where you live. The most popular visualization dashboard that we created in Cincinnati was a snowplow tracker dashboard. So when you have your snowstorms, everybody's panicked, like, when is the snowplow going to get to my street? That's the anxiety. And so we set up the dashboard in which the public could track every single snowplow and know where it was at any given time. And they could figure out when it was likely going to get to their street and reduce telephone calls, reduced anxiety. So another example, of a lot more of that is what we're going to need to do. But I'm sorry, Jeff, I cut you off there.
No, that's a perfect example. It's sort of like tracking Santa on the way to from the North Pole on Christmas Eve. Always a good story when you know the plow is coming by. You know when not to shovel your front walk, right, until after the plow comes by. I do think that part of the issue is having storytellers who are the people who benefit from the good work of local government. So one way to do it, and Shelley, you mentioned this, that's why I wanted to sort of jump in there. If we talk about how we've improved permitting, that's one thing. But if we have a bunch of business people come together and do a video about how easy it is to do permitting in the community, and how much they appreciate the ease and the quickness and the transparency of the process, then that's telling the story, and it's having people who are benefiting. It could be having people who benefit from public safety or emergency response, or public works, or the using the parks to tell a story about how the park makes a big difference in their lives and in their family's life. Capture those stories. And then you can put them on your website. That's passive communication, as people talk about what it's like to live in hometown USA. But then you can push them out via social media, and you can have people and your community ambassadors push those out too. But I think part of the issue is we should focus on what can we think about at the local government level that could be transferable to help our colleagues in federal government and federal agencies and those bureaucracies that are doing just as good work. They're not, the local government's not more valuable in terms of the people who are dedicating their careers to public service, but they're visible, they're there, they're accessible, they're trusted. We should figure out what it is that we're doing to help advise those that are up the rung on the federalism system, but lower down the rung in terms of the level of trust they have. So it might be good if NAPA wants to take a look at the toolkit for telling the local government story, to also think about what parts of that toolkit could be helpful for the Academy fellows who are working at the state and federal level.
So that's a great way to set us up for where do we want to go next, Jeff? So thank you. Let me turn to Wally and then to Mark to see if they have any final things, and then hope everybody in this call will say, hey, I want to continue this conversation and action to actually improve practice. Wally, you want to get started?
Yeah, thank you, Shelley, and thank you to the panel. Really great conversation. The discussions ended with the storytelling is really powerful. And I think the challenge is, what is the coordinated effort to make this happen? And certainly NAPA can play a role, but our sister associations, the alphabet soup that we've been referring to, ICMA, GFOA, APA, all have a role in that too. And I think, what can NAPA do to work with those associations to make it a priority? All these associations themselves are struggling with resources and their mission moving forward. And I hope that NAPA can be a table where all of these groups can come together so we can talk about the resources needed to tell those stories, not only at a national level, but to support our local communities. So again, Shelley, thank you for your leadership today and putting all this together. It's been a great conversation, and certainly at NAPA, the local government working group stands ready to continue the discussion.
Fantastic. Mark?
First of all, congratulations to the presenters, to Harry and Lisa. Your presentations were really excellent. Second observation, and that is at about an hour into the discussion, once you got into the discussion period, the conversation not only changed in terms of how do we communicate, but you also began to discuss how, in fact, do we transform the way government operates. And the starting place, Jeff, is what you noted. And that is, in the past several decades, we have focused on policies and programs. We have not focused on places. And it's time that the 2.0 discussion begin with places, and stories is only part of it. And the possibilities, and I want to highlight the comment that Harry, you made of use of AI and new tools will enable us to think differently about the demand side of government. The presentations were primarily on the supply side, rightfully so, because that's what local government does. But the change and the transformation in this century is that the complexity of what's going on in our local areas is so enormous because of the pace of change that the models and the policies and programs no longer work. And we need tailor-made solutions for the local area, and we're going to need tailor-made we're going to need to restructure how, in fact, we put ourselves together and how we finance so that we'll have the resources to do it. That's the raison d'etre of a discussion that we're starting. I and a number of colleagues on this, transforming how government works in the 21st century. And furthermore, the issues we're confronting are different than the issues we faced in the last century. We were never confronted with extreme weather. We were, to the extent we are now, we were never really confronted with issues like homelessness, which no matter what we seem to do, seem to grow. And furthermore, probably going to grow more that the safety net's being eliminated. So how do we restructure ourselves to deal with 21st century problems is a discussion. And there's an effort underway. And we started with the notion of, so that this can become concrete, let's take one subject area. We chose extreme weather because it is so new. How are we going to handle it? And it's probably going to dominate local government because weather events are all local. 92% of the people in the country last year had an extreme event, and it's going to be probably worse given the entry this year. So that's a discussion, Shelley, that I hope we can put on the table for our next meeting. And
Great.
thank you for this conversation, and Wally for bringing forward these local examples. I think they're terrific.
So thanks to all of you for your past contributions to making government work better and communicating about that. And thank you for your contribution today and going forward. Let us know if and how you want to help going forward. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lisa and Harry and Jeff and Don, for your contributions to this event. It was terrific. Thank you. Oh, and one other thing I want to say is, please think about who you might want. This is a recorded event. Share it. I have to tell you, I made a note. I'm going to send it to my local elected officials because I think that they ought to be thinking about how are they communicating, because I don't think we're doing this enough, Jeff, in Massachusetts communities. So think about that, please. And you know, some of you have talked about the networks. Wally just talked about, you know, the League and National Association of Counties, et cetera. How can who might want to share this so that we can start to build capacity and find those examples? So thank you all. It was great to see you.
Shelley,
Yeah.
Shelley, I just want to add one additional thought. Communication, when you go back to its Latin and Greek derivative root, means common action. And so therefore, the stories mean we're going to develop common action, and we're going to change the way we operate. 2.0 means change.
And on that note, have a great rest of day and week, everybody. See ya.